Cross of the Sphinx. Better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to understand this personality construct without the connection to the design. Why? Because it's really important to grasp that this is the dilemma of the passenger. In looking at the body graph, it is a surface game. In understanding the life that will live out in this body graph, our job here is not to look at the surface in that way, this way that we're looking at here, because this is the illusion. And here what we're doing, the best way to deal with the illusion, to give somebody a tool, follow your strategy and authority, we have to look at the quantum, right? But now we're going to go and look underneath. That begins with, first of all, looking only at the personality. This journey here in the beginning is really about understanding the personality in and of itself without any connection whatsoever to the design. So in understanding the personality without connection to the design, we split things apart. You'll notice in my mutated slides, you'll see that I give people an image of their personality and their design on my presentation. Some people just give people a written document rather than presentations. I like presentations because I like to see things, and I personally, for me, pulls all the stress off of me if I know I've got content and images and videos that cover all my bases when somebody's getting a foundational analysis from me. This is not the way that you have to do things. I'm just letting you know why I do what I do. It makes me feel more comfortable. I'm doing it. Okay. So here, what we're looking at today is we're not looking at Alan Leo anymore when we split apart the personality, because Alan Leo is a construct created by that magnetic monopole that holds together in this illusion that particular design configuration with this particular personality configuration. The monopole holding us into the illusion of an I outside of whatever else is not I. Okay. So the personality crystal and its potential here, down here at this level, we're looking simply at personality crystal data, nothing else, just the personality crystal data. So here we're looking at the purest state of who we think we are. Doesn't mean that it ends up that we do precisely think that way. Why? You'll see that because there's so many things that are going to change it. And today we're going to look at that. Why does this person get lost in their Maya? And where do they get lost? Where would they get lost? We're going to show you everywhere. So as an example, here's the aspect of that 61 that will meet the 24 and the 11 that will meet the 56. And every single quantum, this plus that, is something that is totally different from its source. But in reality here, what we're looking at is simply that aspect, the personality construct. The mind gets stuck in the mental conditioners opposite of this conditioning receptor, or the active potentials that are pointed at undefined gates or undefined traits, we could call them. If I pull away, and I've got it back here as a shadow just to remind you what his quantum looks like. If I pull away the design and just look at the personality construct, look down here at the bottom at what Ra says about the impact of conditioning. We begin with centers, and it doesn't make any difference whether, in fact, in the illusion that becomes Alan Leo, that there happens to be a defined sacral and a defined root. That doesn't mean anything whatsoever to this personality, because through the personality construct, it's undefined. Same thing with what's going on at the mind level up here, undefined to the personality, right? All the personality has is something very different than what the quantum has. So with regards to the impact of conditioning, we always begin with the centers. Look at how many centers are undefined. One of the first things that it has to recognize is how much it is conditioned from within. Within. So here in this particular graph of the personality, we see all the centers as potential conditioning forces, all of them, regardless of whether or not in the overall view of this configuration that they end up being defined. Okay. The impact of conditioning, all of the centers that are undefined from the personality construct's point of view. So as far as that personality is concerned, any definition of those centers is going to bring out a tendency to a not self strategy. And if we look at the design here, we will see that there is a potential for not self strategies. But again, the intensity of that strategy and the way it's going to operate in the illusion on the surface again is something that is going to adjust, and it's going to adjust to the impact of the design crystal. So remember in LYD how I bring up the story of my unconsciously defined G and how I operated like an undefined G at the beginning from the mind space, constantly seeking for love and direction from others, wondering what I was going to be when I grew up, even though I was on the path of becoming an analyst. Am I going to be a good analyst? Am I going to be a good teacher? Constantly questioning my identity, my role. The impact of the conditioning is there from the design to the personality construct. Do you remember if your personality is very surprised by something that happens, if you have strong unconscious activation? Why the heck am I doing that? This is the thing. Okay. So what happens with your mind is there's two specific kinds of conditioning. The personality has to deal with the conditioning it receives from the design crystal. It has to. It's helpless, choiceless. It sees when the body is moving, it questions and it wonders. And if it's very, very different, which most of the case, it will be very, very different, 88 degrees difference. If it's not deconditioned and if it's struggling against the flow of its life, it's going to get more and more frustrated, angry, bitter, resentful, whatever the case may be. And that conditioning from the design crystal brings about the deepest problems within the overall being. So from the first specific kind of conditioning here, the conditioning from the design brings about some challenges. And the impact of conditioning from others and the transits brings about different challenges. This is the second thing to understand. The impact of you with the other projector, really study those others in your life. And ultimately, the impact of the program itself, manifestors, reflectors, study that program. All of us can, but really where you're going to get some traction here is really recognizing the impact of these conditionings, not just from others and people, but also from your design onto your personality. Okay, so let's deconstruct now the personality some further down the road here, the cross of life, where you see the sun, earth, and the personality sun, earth are within the design. Is something that it's enormously important because it changes the rules right away. Not everyone gets an opportunity to live out their purpose, and not everyone gets an opportunity to live out the awareness of their purpose alone. So if we look at this cross of life, notice how they're not circled in there in the body graph. But everything else that is circled outside on the right-hand side, those are the things that are dormant with regards to activations that are inconsistent and coming from places in the openness. So for example, you look at this personality sun earth configuration. They are part of the personality definition. So these are active principles, active characteristics with a quality that shines the purpose consistently. Okay, they're not circled because these are the ones that are dormant potentials. But if you look at all the circled aspects here, they're all part of undefined centers. And this is why we can't trust making decisions from the exacerbation and distortion of the things that are open out there, because we're looking for consistency. The mind is searching for congruency. It wants what it wants. The genes want what is different. I want to have your babies. I want to be this or that, says the mind. Okay, so remember with the personality sun earth in your human design, the personality sun earth is what you be. And the nodes are how you see. In other words, Ra says this great vertical power, actually at 88 degrees, the sun earth, that programs us to the point that it is the purpose that they program us with. That is what we are here to fulfill in this life. So this is the being, the programming of the being. And when you go to the nodes, you get the programming of the seeing versus being. Remember, you're going to use different terminology when you're describing the lunar nodes versus the sun earth, because this is our line of geometry here. Nodes are very, very different. Sun earth is what you be. And this is how you see where you be. So if we go back to the chart now, what we're seeing is that right away, if you look at the north node in this configuration, it's the 60th gate, and it's in an undefined center, at least as far as the personality is concerned. Remember, it was defined when we had the red stuff in. But as far as the personality construct identifies with and recognizes things, it's in an open root center, an undefined root center. In being in an open root center, it means that it is bringing a great deal of pressure to see things in a certain way. And yet, because it's inconsistent, people might not be able to identify with it. It's a 6-line process, so it's going to take a lot of time to get to maturity. The nodes are really important because it gives us a way to see. And there's the dilemma. This personality does not have a consistent way of seeing in the world. It doesn't. It means they're blind at times. So go look at your nodes. Are they in undefined centers? When it's a personality construct by itself, it means that you're blind at times. And then you end up in a situation where you try to explain to them what they should see or what they could see or what they might see, and then they get very confused. It's one of the little tricks of recognizing how to preface what you're saying. Instead of saying you will, say you may notice, instead of this is how you're designed to see. Because if they don't identify with it, they get confused and then you lose them. Okay. So here are the receptors inside of the design. The theme here are receptor mechanics. Just the beginning of what conditioning is, and only on the surface, because we're only looking at the surface level here. For the beginning of the conditioning, we have here in this configuration, we can see we have 6 open centers, 6 undefined centers, where all of those activations are. And we see that there are many different ways that this person could think about things that don't matter to him. You can see right away that this being is going to have their foundation be manifested. I manifest. Okay, that ego to G to throat combination is manifestor. Twin definition here and here. So this is what it identifies with who it thinks it is consistently. And that is the conditioning away from selfhood, which is who I am for myself as a generator, not what is my impact in the world as a manifester. Okay. So it's a powerful conditioning force here. So much of what this being is, probably in terms of what they live out, is an illusion, as their lives is likely mostly lost to them because of the conditioning. He says, oh, what these centers do, we're here to understand the mind of the passenger. And when you look at this configuration, you have to see that there is so much more that isn't this personality, just on the surface, not even talking about the gates and lines and colors and tones and bases and all that stuff underneath the surface. This is powerful stuff right there at the surface. Powerful conditioning. So we see not knowing what to feel, so the avoidance of confrontation and truth, not knowing when to say no, when enough is enough, hurrying under pressure just to get things done, not knowing what to fear, so holding on to things that are unhealthy, trying to convince oneself that one is sure and certain, and not knowing what is interesting, so we lose focus. Just an example, just there at the surface. That's the whole person's movie and life, and why they base their decisions on what they think they are and what they do about what they think they are, because of the powerful conditioning of the mind. So when you're looking at somebody's graph, you're not just looking for these big, chunky, white activations. see I have the design there. You're not just looking at those centers. You're looking also from the personality construct, what is unconsciously defined, because the personality has no way of recognizing that when it's lost in the confusion of the Maya and the not self world. When we're looking at the personality in this way, we see that everything that is not personality is not personality. Even if it's going to share the illusion of the same body, it's only an illusion. They basically don't have anything to do with each other. It's one of the strange things about how this mechanism works. It's only an illusion. Strange thing. Here at the channel level, now we're looking at the receptor field. 22 completely open channels. When we see somebody's definition and they have 2 or 3 or 4 definitions, we say, boy, are they ever defined? Okay? No, look at the personality construct and what it deals with. See how choiceless and helpless it is, floating around, misidentifying with everything else is something that it is, trying to make that consistent, being receptive to all of those channels. So in this channel, look at this personality construct. Look at what this personality has to deal with. 22 open channels. What is an open channel? Receptor. A receptor field, as Ra calls it. Anything that is a receptor field is a conditioning field. Why? Because this is not who this person is. And every single one of these channels have a strategy. They all have a strategy. They're going to blame because they're all channels that are undefined, totally open there. They're going to blame. And then it's going to be attached to what specifically are they blaming about and the undefined centers as far as the thematic that is there. That's the receptor field we're dealing with. So the channel level, every single one of them, 22 open channels. Not just a matter that, okay, we've got these open centers and here's that not self strategy. But now you have tools to see there's sub-themes of the not self strategies that run out of every gate that's in those open centers, not just the channels, every gate too. Yeah. So you have these not self strategies in the gates that are open on the other side, and you have the quantum of that not self strategy that emerges in an open channel. So there's an immense potential for wisdom. That personality with its 2 definitions and its bright, shiny G center right there. And then 22 open channels that are conditioning it. Whoops. Remember, unattached observation of the openness leads to wisdom. Openness is where we have tremendous wisdom. That's the other side of this ugly side, is the beautiful side. The beautiful side is that each and every one of those 22 open channels has a potential for wisdom. When I look at a body graph in this way, I see this wonderful polarity between pain and wisdom, between suffering and wisdom, because wisdom is there as a potential. And how thrilling it is to embrace your receptive ability, to embrace and accept all of these receptors without them being agents of your transformation, without them ultimately impacting on the way in which you do this or that. For our intelligence, the moment that seeing is something that is natural for a human being, the world will be different. When you get to that place of seeing the openness for what it is, not identifying with it as something that you need to make a decision about or identify with as something that is wrong in you or wrong in the other. Nothing broken, nothing missing, nothing lacking. Remember, channels are not wise unless you have a particularly wise line. Channels that are defined, I say, okay? Say, maybe you have a fully mature 6-line process. My husband has that. He's got 6 lines on either side. But one of them is Mars, and he's not 50 yet. So is that wise yet? No. Still making some, it is over-informing for him. So the stuff that comes out of that person's mouth, he has no filter, okay? But when you're talking about wisdom, unless the line itself says wise, or you've got a 6-line process that is not in Mars. Here, this one's in Mars. Mars is immaturity. Or maturing energy, you could say, to be more polite. But it's immature and it may not mature. Before 50, this is not mature. There's a timing for all 6-line processes, okay? So don't use wisdom in the channel description unless you've got line that says wisdom in there. We do not see the way we're intended to see. This is an illusion. So if you don't see the way you are intended to see, what do you get? And yet, if you're seeing with unattached observation of the openness, the potential for wisdom is absolutely extraordinary. So is he wise about enthusiasm? At his age and stage, he would have experimented. Remember, eccentricity, unusualness. This is where we have potential for innovation. What makes him weird? He would have been wise about identifying with patterns, solutions, the depth of others after that age of 50 and beyond. He would have had the energy, because eccentricity, unusualness, chaos, innovation, he would have had an energy that would have learned from trial and error in his younger years about misidentifying with the pattern and developing skills and talent, you could say. Okay. So, any other questions that you have? I'm looking forward. We're almost done. These enormous conditioning power of the hanging gates now. You see them hanging there. Always looking for the other side, the perfect binary, my other half, my missing piece, the mind says. So in other words, the moment that you see a hanging gate, you're looking at the power of genetics. In other words, looking for difference, and looking for difference, losing one's difference or differentiation, misidentifying with the other side is something that you have to have, that you must fixate on, lock in, make you or a part of you, rather than being open to the other. So this is going to be very helpful when you start to study how to do relationship analysis, the dynamics of this versus that, and how they show up in relationship with each other. That sun, let's say, in that seventh gate is always being attracted to the 31. Yeah, leadership versus influence. So there's always this lack of completion in the way in which it looks at things. The fact is that that sun in that seventh gate does not see themselves as having a true role, because they don't have consistent influence. They're always looking for, how do I get my influence out into the world, especially with this conditioning to think that they are a manifester. And with that second line that is unaware of its leadership, remember we can use the term unaware with the second line, that they have to be called out, they have to do what's natural for them. So when you're looking at this configuration, you can see so much of what this personality is. It actually doesn't accept it. No, I have to be this. I have to be that. I have to be this. I have to be that, and this, and that, and whatever the case may be. All of that is going to be what the mind obsesses with and makes decisions because of what's on the other side of the channel, not their authoritative process. When they're lost in identifying with I, this is what ensues. And we are helpless and powerless against that, obsessing about the other side until we've had our deconditioning process, which is a cellular renewal that takes 7 years. Not a death sentence. And at the end of 7 years, you just go on into another layering. We're all kind of tricked us in that way. Oh, you get another 7 years, because we're always being conditioned. So as an example here, when you have a gate and you don't have the other end in terms of the not self mind, your mind thinks it's a personal failing or fault. Missing, lacking, broken. Now, example, I have the 16, says this person, and he doesn't have the 48. So I don't have enough depth, and it's my fault, the my, always thinking my with the other side. So that becomes a deep conditioning field on what? Fear of inadequacy about the body, the physical form. So, for example, in that 48th gate, in an open splenic center, not knowing what to fear, and then hanging on to maybe concepts, I think that's in the next slide, that don't serve him. Being insecure and under pressure is an example. Insecure and under pressure. Being afraid, fearful of failure because of the pressure, and not really having an awareness of knowing what can endure. and always thinking that that's a physical failing because I'm afraid of the inadequacy that I have. Thinking it's a problem when it's designed to be a place of wisdom. So here's the layers of the not self strategy. When you look at the splenic system, open, so not knowing what to fear, and then two very powerful conditioning forces on the other side with that open, undefined route to that open splenic system. So pointed at the hot spots, we could say, bright lights that shine like a moth. Your mind is like a moth to a flame. The flame is in the openness. And that is what becomes the not self strategy, impacting the way in which the mind makes decisions. I have to make a spontaneous choice, action to resolve this fear, or because I don't know what to fear, I'm going to hold on to this bad concept that isn't good for me, or this person or place or thing in this environment to make me feel safe. So this person might be asked to do something, asked and no response. And there in the background, oh, I have to, in order to resolve my fear that I'm going to fail if I don't do this thing. Have to, must, should. That fear of inadequacy and failure becomes their not self mind's strategy in order to resolve the health, safety, security issues of the body. We're not just talking about these larger receptors that we have, the open centers anymore, not at analyst training level. Now you're seeing everything, and it can become overwhelming. So remember, where are we going to have the biggest results? Any place where we have, if you're looking at the design side and what creates the definition that is there, look to those channels, recognize that that is what the body itself is doing, and it conditions the mind to think that there's something wrong there. Okay, so I'll give you my example real quick. And if there's anything that you guys want to share, I'm so delighted to hear your process with this, because really, I can sit here and have the energy to lecture, and it feels very fulfilling, but not as fulfilling as you guys actually getting it and sharing it with me, your process, which is why I love when anybody brings in some share. So as an example, I've got an 8-1. I know I'm a freak. I know I'm weird. I know I'm different. But sometimes when I'm teaching and the sing-song voice comes out, or I'm all silly and goofy and weird, and my mind goes, why did you do that? What the hell? You know, do you really want to appear to be that for others? Why did that just come out of your mouth? You know, that kind of, oh my God, why did I do that? Okay, that's one place where the personality construct gets confused and shames, blames, guilts, faults.